Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba, the progenitor of LabumaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe you can gain a competitive advantage, but always betting on Black. Back once again with a live. I know it's been a while. Please forgive us, but we're back once again, of course, in conjunction with Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. We have a great show for you all this afternoon, but also make sure that you be a blessing to the show. You can, of course, donate at, of course, Lumumba Speaks on Cash App. And, of course, you can actually also hit the super chat on YouTube if you're watching to be a blessing to the show. But we're here to discuss, what does Larry Hoover's commutation mean for the Black community? Many of you are unaware of who Larry Hoover is. He, of course, was the leader of the Chicago street gang, the Gangster Disciples. He, of course, was sentenced on federal and state charges and received, I believe, a life sentence in federal court. He, of course, was incarcerated at the Supermax facility in Florence, Colorado, where he was, of course, isolated and locked in a cell 23 hours a day, a cell that was the size of course, a parking space, right? And so his sentence was commuted. And so definitely I want to tap in and get you all's thoughts on, what does this mean for the Black community? So as we know, Trump has, of course, stated rather consistently that he has an anathema for violent crime. Hoover, of course, was known for not being a ruthless criminal, drug kingpin, crime lord, etc. And of course, his sentence has been, of course, commuted. However, he still will more than likely face a significant amount of time in prison due to the state charges that he was convicted on. But definitely want to get everyone's thoughts regarding what do you think about this? What does it mean for the Black community? Some people say this is a win for the Black community. Some have even argued that Trump, of course, community who shows that Trump has a soft spot for Black people who have been ensnared by the carceral state. We all know that, of course, the criminal justice system is inherently racist at every level, local, state, and federal, and that many would make this argument. Some would say this is an intrepid contradiction of course, Trump's position that he has an anathema for violent crime. Others argue that this is a commutation that is symbolic rather than substantial, to the fact that he would not be eligible for parole on his state charges until he is 111 years old. That, of course, would be in 2062. So there's a lot to unpack here, family. So definitely tap in. The link is in the description. I will put the link in the chat momentarily, but definitely want to hear you all's thoughts on, of course, what does this mean for the Black community? Of course, we're talking Larry Elder, of course, leader, founder of the Chicago street gang, the Gangster Disciples, right? Of course, he was convicted for up to 200 years in prison for murder in the 1970s. And it was a sort of punishment that seemed destined to end his career as a Chicago gang leader. However, of course, he continued to lead the Gangster Disciples, even from behind prison walls. And many people in the Black community, including, of course, Kanye West, but even a number of notable celebrities and even some people who we feel are activists, advocated for him because he would talk oftentimes a good game regarding Black power. We're fighting against each other. But then, of course, at the same time, same vein, he would also articulate his willingness to continue to run the gang empire, even while he was, of course, incarcerated. So that led to further convictions, I believe, if I remember correctly, in the 1990s. So there's a lot to discuss here. Many argue he was a bit of a Robin Hood, to where the organization, the street gang, they had, voter registration drives, educational. They were holding political rallies, calling for educational reform. But the issue was that, of course, it was funded by drug money, supported by, of course, gang muscle. So this is an issue of concern. So tap in, family. Make sure if you haven't, make sure you subscribe. Of course, you hit the thumbs up button and hit that notification bell. You're watching, of course, LabumaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, in conjunction with Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and the home of African-centered news and information. And make sure that you're a blessing to the show, family. So you can hit the super chat and the Cash App at Lumumba Speaks. Definitely want to hear from you all. So I'm going to put the link in the chat, family. Put the link in the chat. and definitely want to hear from you all. And just remember, family, we go over the ground rules here at Lumumba Speaks. First and foremost, diversity of thought is welcome. So irrespective if you're on the left, you're on the right, you're right down the middle, that's of no consequence. We want you to be part of the conversation. Number two, excuse me, we are advocating for you attack the argument, not the person. So facts over feelings. So if you disagree with someone, attack the argument, not the person. Right. Number three, no epithets of any kind are allowed, particularly racial epithets. Right. This is a space of Black empowerment. We believe in self-respect, self-defense, and of course, self-determination. So we want to respect ourselves as African people. So we do not engage in epithets of any kind. Now, last but not least, you can't make a claim that is, of course, patently false. So you wouldn't make the argument that LeBron James is the GOAT, which of course I would vehemently disagree. But if you were to make that argument, that is quite all right. But if you were to say that he's the GOAT because he won more championships than Kobe Bryant, of course, that would be a claim that's patently false. And then we will tap in and look to, of course, correct you. Once again, family, if you're watching on Twitter, I said we have quite a few viewers on Twitter. You can, of course, tap in and be part of the conversation. You can leave Twitter, come on over to, of course, Lumumba Speaks on YouTube. And or what we can do is I can put the link in on Twitter. You can tap in and be part of the conversation there as well. But LMA, long time no see. My brother who still dribbles down the VA, what's the word?
Dr. Lumumba, how are you doing? Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine. I'm doing quite all right. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, man. How are you? Good to see you. Good to hear you from you. I hope things are going well for you in California.
Yeah, just busy.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah. A quick thing. This is kind of funny. You mentioned you misspoke a minute ago. You said Larry Elder as opposed to Larry Hoover.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Thank you for correcting me. It's Larry Hoover. Yes,
I was like, man, that would be the day if Larry Elder was running. But anyway, yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting. I remember, obviously, I've heard Larry Hoover's name, throughout, listening to rap throughout the years. I never knew who he was. I never really looked into it. Like I said, with your brief synopsis, I think it's interesting. Like I said, Trump, and to your question, I don't think Trump does anything just out of the kindness of his heart. I think that this is going to be it's a two-part play. Well, I'm of two minds with this. The first one is basically I think he's just trying to it's part of his kind of media blitz in a sense where he just does something every week, every month. He is doing something outrageous that kind of keeps him in the headlines, So I think that's just one. And also I think he's trying to kind of woo the kind of the celebrity worshiping, sector of the Black community. I think he's just trying to woo that, stay in their good graces, or not good graces, but kind of give them a little bit of red meat, in a sense, to kind of keep his name a buzz in a sense. But I think ultimately, what I think he's gearing up for is to commute Derek Chauvin's sentence. I think that's what he's doing. So I think he's trying to say, it's almost like, there's something that you want to do. So you just kind of like do something that you don't want to do just to say you're fair. You're being fair. Like, hey, if I can, you guys had no problem when I commuted Larry Hoover, so you should have no problem when I commute Derek Chauvin. So that's my, I got my tinfoil do-rag on. That's what I think is, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually either the next, maybe later on this year or next year, he commutes Derek Chauvin's sentence.
I think that's a great point. I do know that one of the individuals who's in Trump's orbit discussed publicly on the platform that they felt that Chauvin had been improperly incarcerated, improperly convicted, that they were looking to, of course, commute that sentence because, of course, he was convicted on federal crimes. I'm quite sure he was convicted on state crimes as well.
Yeah.
But this is something, once again, that was seen. So you can't argue about us, of course, commuting Chauvin if we can commuted Hoover. So that's a great point there, but I don't think a lot of people, of course, would even consider that issue. But great point.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, because Trump doesn't. I mean, because think of the type of person that Larry Hoover was. Most of the commutations and that Trump did were what's what like white collar crimes and people that kind of paid into his paid into his well, actually no, he did. He did kill Patrick, right? Yeah, he commuted kill Patrick. What? No, he did kill Patrick, right?
He commuted Kilpatrick at the end of his first term.
Yeah, end of his first term. Okay,
Yes,
okay. So I mean, I don't know. Even that one, at the end of his first term, so he might have been trying to win some black people over with that one. But actually, I want to look into that one because he did. Yeah, he commuted his. I just want to know what was the. Well, they don't really give his his thought process to why he wanted to do it.
Yeah,
because I want to know like the time frame. Because the only thing I can think of would be that. Maybe because was it before the election or after the election?
It was right before he was going to, of course, leave office after he lost.
Okay, this is after he lost. Okay, well, yeah, that's a weird one then. Okay, yeah, maybe. I mean,
that's typically what would happen. Typically, presidents will wait to the end of their, of course, administration to commute people. But so
right.
Real quick, let me read this article from the New York Times. As many of you know,
yeah, go ahead.
I subscribe to the New York Times. So we see here this, of course, is an article in the New York Times. Dated today, actually. No, 2 days ago. I'm sorry. Regarding, of course, Larry Hoover, former Chicago gang leader, wins commutation from Trump. As we see here, Illinois judge sentenced Larry Hoover to up to 200 years in prison for murder in the 1970s. It was a sort of punishment that seemed destined to end his career as a Chicago gang leader. But in the decades they followed, prosecutors said Mr. Hoover's power only grew as he directed one of Chicago's most powerful gangs, the Gangster Disciples, from behind prison walls. Young members would pledge allegiance to Mr. Hoover, whom they called their king. And those who broke Gangster Disciple rules, prosecutors said, would face bloody retribution up to and including deletion. His influence continued to grow into the 1990s when he was convicted of more crimes in federal court and shipped off to a supermax prison with a life sentence. On Wednesday, after years of lobbying from Mr. Hoover's supporters, including celebrities, President Trump fully commuted the federal sentence of Mr. Hoover, according to a White House official familiar with the matter. The commutation was not likely to bring Mr. Hoover, who is now 74 and largely in memory of his hometown, back to Chicago streets. His state prison sentence remains in effect with a projected parole date of 2062. Where Mr. Hoover would be 111 years old. But the president's decision showed his willingness to extend leniency to some prisoners, despite his frequent rhetoric about the danger of violent criminal gangs. Jennifer Bonjean, a lawyer for Mr. Hoover, said that the process to commute Mr. Hoover's sentence had been years in the making. The entertainer Ye, who was formerly known as Kanye West, lobbied Mr. Trump during his first term in office. She said, and others have joined the effort since then. There have been a lot of support from advocates who have been preaching free Larry Hoover for a long time, Ms. Bonjean said. The process of lobbying Mr. Trump intensified this year after Alice Johnson, who was sentenced to life in prison in a drug conspiracy case, whose sentence was later commuted by Mr. Trump, was appointed a pardon czar in the White House to advise the president on clemency, said Justin Moore, a lawyer for Mr. Hoover. And this is the actual position Trump created in his cabinet titled the pardon czar. I actually went online and checked it out. The phone conversations between Mr. Moore and Ms. Johnson became more frequent in the last 4 to 5 weeks, Mr. Moore said, adding that Ms. Johnson had relayed that the president was very keen on releasing Larry. White House officials declined to comment on the record. Mr. Hoover's legal team received word on Monday that the commutation was going to happen. This is an older gentleman who has a lot of health concerns and who has aged out of criminality, Mr. Moore said. The specifics of what would happen to Mr. Hoover were unclear on Wednesday evening. Mr. Hoover remained in the Federal Bureau of Prisons online directory, and 2 representatives for the Illinois Department of Corrections did not immediately respond to questions about the case. Mr. Moore said he was hopeful that Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, a Democrat who was a frequent critic of Mr. Trump, would decide to commute Mr. Hoover's state sentence. Mr. Pritzker declined through a spokesman to comment. In Chicago, Mr. Hoover built a highly regimented gang that prosecutors said sold drugs, laundered money, and ruled over large geographic territories where non-members would have to pay a street tax in order to sell drugs, according to a 1995 indictment of Mr. Hoover and other gang members. This is in a very real sense an outlaw form of government, Ronald Safer, the lead prosecutor, told jurors during Mr. Hoover's federal trial in 1997. This is, in a very real sense, an outlaw form. The gang also expanded beyond the drug trade, starting businesses, leading voter registration drives, and holding political rallies calling for education reform. They register voters, which is a wonderful thing, Mr. Safer said during Mr. Hoover's federal trial. The problem is it was funded by drug money and supported by gang muscle. In recent years, as Mr. Hoover has sought release from his federal sentence at the restricted Supermax prison in Colorado, his supporters have argued that he has been rehabilitated in prison, that he no longer wishes to lead the gangster disciples, that he still faces a long prison term in Illinois. He spent 23 hours a day in a concrete cell, no larger than a parking space. His lawyers wrote in a court filing in 2022, for over 2 decades, he has had virtually no contact with the outside world. He is quite literally buried alive. So this is the issue here, right? He was the former undisputed leader of perhaps the largest monolithic criminal organization that this country has ever known, which had more than 30,000 members in 28 states and was responsible for the sale of 100 million worth of drugs a year in Illinois alone, right? Mr. Safer, who now is in private practice, who, of course, prosecuted Hoover in federal court in the 90 states. I believe in mercy, I believe in redemption, and I believe in rehabilitation. But there are some crimes that are so heinous, so reprehensible, that they are not deserving of mercy. So, family, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Like I said, I get not, I don't know, like I have, certain feelings about, when it comes to like criminality and stuff like that. Because I do believe in, giving, I don't know, like sometimes it's like, lock them up and throw away the key. And the other times it's just like, that whole saying, time heals all wounds, in a sense, where it's just like, okay, if the person has truly reformed and they have, depending on the severity of the crime, I can, give someone parole after, a couple of years or whatever. I don't know. I'm torn on this one. I probably would lean towards, what's it called? House arrest or, what's the word? Parole, not parole, but
house arrest.
Which one? House arrest and probation. I mean, obviously he's 70-something years old, so you don't have to worry about him too much. But I or at least let him, go to like a lower, what's what I'm looking for? A lower security facility, something that he can like, at least spend more time with his family and get, better visitation, right? So better visitation. I don't know if there's such thing as, I think I've heard the term before, like, what's it called? Not golf club. What's it called? It's like it's called a golf club prison, where it's just like country club prison. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just like it's still a prison, but it's nicer than others, and you get to spend time with your family, stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, maybe
I
we can
think the issue here,
implement something like that.
I think the issue here is that there are individuals who have argued, of course, that he continued to run the criminal organization even while being incarcerated. So the argument is that he actually hasn't been rehabilitated, and that the claims he makes of course, gang violence, promoting Black fratricide, he's simply playing to the media. So I think that's something to consider there.
I mean, it's something to consider. How long? Well, I guess at the point when he was running it from inside the prison, we can't, we don't have the counterfactuals to say, had he been left in that prison, how long he would have done it. Maybe the fact that they put him in the Supermax, I hate to use the word broke, but it kind of changed his, opinion. So to the point where he became remorseful. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this one. So you can let Michelle get give her thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me on the panel.
No problem. Anytime.
Yeah, long time, Dr. Loom. I was getting worried about you.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but Hoover, I'm from the DMV area. I live right side of Bowie. I've known people who indirectly know the family.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it being conflicted by me being from the DC area. There are a lot of men who are and still are in Mr. Hoover's situation. So again, I'm also conflicted too, because again, this was over 30, 40 years ago. He's a different person now.
Well, very quickly, if I could briefly interject, and I hate to cut you off, but I don't know if you saw, but I just read the New York Times article that states that he was still, of course, leading the organization while he was incarcerated, while he's been incarcerated. In fact, what took place was he was initially convicted, and then while he was in prison, he was convicted, if I remember correctly, back in the 70s, if I remember correctly. Of course, don't fact check me on that. Yeah, he was initially convicted back in the 70s. Then he was convicted in federal court in the late 90s for leading the organization from prison.
Okay, that's still 40 years ago.
Well, I would say a little, almost 30 years ago.
Okay, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, 30 years ago. Okay.
And the thing was, and real quick, I didn't read all of the article because it just been too long-winded, but they stated that they even since he's been in the Supermax, he's still been attempting to lead the organization while he's been in the Supermax. And that they have documented evidence via phone calls of having young people pledge their lives to him and call him their king and do his bidding out on the street. So the evidence, of course, shows that he hasn't changed.
Okay. I mean, I can't refute it. I'm not his, attorney.
Right.
But that is concerning. When he gets out, will he be monitored?
Right. Well, it depends he's not going to get out because he still has to serve time for his state convictions. Mm-hmm. Right.
Maybe Westmore will let him out, or
he has state convictions in Illinois.
He's in Illinois.
Oh, oops. Yeah. Well, I guess Westmore can't get him.
Yeah, Westmore can't get him out.
I don't think Westmore would.
We should do a show on Westmore and his, the reparations bill. So
that's going to be a touchy one.
Yeah, go right ahead. And real quick, let's get this up here from Zongo Native. I do apologize, Zongo. If you could tap in, you're more than welcome to do so. So is that good news? He's asking the question, is this good news? I hope he's changed because I saw most GDs who are committing heinous crimes in the community are happy for him. Yes, so this is an issue. I mean, we can even open this up to a broader conversation. Why do we tend to have a soft spot in the Black community for criminals who are, of course, engaged in criminal activity in which the overwhelming majority of people who are victims of their criminal activities are Black people? So that's a conversation we can have as well.
Another conversation we need to have as well is that why aren't we the authority of right and wrong in our communities? Why is an external court system ruling on our?
No one is. Vigilantism isn't allowed per the law.
But Michael, why are we? If we were to, we had several Black men in our community who try to organize, register, go through the protocols. Again, I'm not versed in what exactly occurred, so they can at least do some type of mediation. But every time they do that, they get dismantled.
Well, so one, I would say this, and LMA, you could tap in, of course. So one, I would make the argument that there are informal forms of justice in the Black community where people say, okay, there's an issue, we try to handle this at the lowest level. But we also have to understand that legally, vigilantism is not allowed, not only in America, but in any country is vigilantism allowed. Right? And so I would argue, because we see in our community that on a macro level, we have a soft spot for criminals and criminality, the reality of the situation is that if we were to say we're going to have an internal mechanism for addressing behavior that's in contravention of the law, I would argue most people would go unprosecuted, right? Because we know in the Black community, lack of accountability is omnipresent. If we're just going to be completely honest, I don't think that will work at all. Go ahead.
So then you say that we can't self-govern ourselves?
I don't think that's possible. I don't. I mean, for real quick, for example, look at what happened in New Orleans with those brothers who escaped the prison, right? And you look at the majority of the individuals who helped them escape prison and aided them once they got out, right? Once they were able to successfully flee the institution, right? And these are people who have been convicted of murder. These are individuals who are pending murder cases. So these are individuals who have a long and sordid history of violence towards Black people. And guess who's aiding and abetting their escape?
Their families and friends.
Yeah, their families and friends.
Because most of the people in our community, particularly the Black women, and you know this better than me because you work in the social services field, most of our sisters are what? Criminal sympathizers.
Oh yeah, criminal lovers, not even sympathizers, lovers.
This is why they always got someone to put money in their books, visit them, give them a place to stay when they get out. LMA, go right ahead.
But I would like to say I don't think this is particularly a Black issue. I think this is an American issue. Okay. The United States has always venerated her outlaws, from Jesse James to Al Capone to, you know what I'm saying, the Godfather, you know what I'm saying? Was it a Whitey Burgess, what's his name? Whitey Burgess, I can't think of his name. But, and there's always going to be some woman who is into bad boys. Was it Charles Manson got married while he was in prison? Right. So I don't think this is, particularly a Black thing. I think it's just an American thing, and, Black people are a part of it. And I do think that, I do think that when it comes to criminality in the Black community, I think that because we have such a, we've been the victim of police brutality, unjust laws, that we are hyper, what's what I'm looking for?
Vigilant.
Yeah, kind of hyper vigilant when it comes to like someone being accused of, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like if, you come from a community that's all, where, was it like 50% of all of the exonerated people who were wrongly convicted, exonerated by DNA, 50% of them are Black men, right? So we have the evidence that shows that, we are being targeted by the police. We're being unfairly targeted. Not saying that, this is not to say that we don't have criminals and malcontents in our community. It's just saying that since we are over policed and we have at any point, if you're just in like a poor neighborhood, you can just be guilty by association and then be sent up the creek, or overly held accountable, right? Like, I forget what's his name, Browder, the young man who was accused of stealing a book pack, and he spent 2 years, and I forgot the I'm talking about, the young man in New York who was accused of, I think it was Anthony Browder. I can't remember his name, but anyway. But I knew he was accused of stealing a book bag, and he ended up spending like a year in solitary confinement before he ever received a trial, right? Oh. So, say again?
I got you. I understand.
Yeah. So I'm not condoning, but I can understand that, you have a community that is going to be kind of overly sympathetic, hyper sympathetic towards, some folks that we got that are, happen to be on the wrong side of the law. Doesn't justify it, but, I do think we need, like I said, we need some personal healing, some community-based healing, so that we can start to even begin to trust each other, trust the society that we live. Well, we need justice first of all. We can trust the society we live. Right. But I do think we need some. Right. But I do think that we need something, so that we can get out of this. Because I'm not gonna lie. We have seen a lot of oversensitivity, hypersensitivity, not hypersensitivity, hyper. Which one? I don't know if it's hyper compassion. Like, yeah, like it goes, it's beyond what should be necessary. Like, if you did a crime and it's, we get your fingerprints on it or whatever, it should just be, sorry, homie, you did the crime, you gotta pay, you gotta be held accountable. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how we get there. Because like I said, when you have a system, the dominant culture who is looking to put you in jail, right? And then, you've worn out the welcome within your own community, bro, it's going to be, you know what I'm saying? It's going to be like shooting, was it a fish in a barrel? Like, because if you see what I'm saying? If you have a system that's already really willing and able and ready to throw your ass in jail for anything, you
For
know?
anything.
Yeah. And now, you know, yeah, I don't know. We got ourselves in a bad predicament. And then you have, like I said, you know, it's only going to get worse. Like the economic situation. You know, you have a lot of people, you know, losing their jobs, getting gentrified, their backs against the wall. So, I mean, to me, it's just like criminality is kind of not. It's more highly probable and likely depending on the level of the economic uh, economic security of the community. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I don't
Absolutely.
know. It's a tough one for me. Yeah, but yeah, I don't have a good answer.
So DOL states, are you saying that white prison escapees would not get help from the community they lived in? So I think that's a great point. I think once again, it would depend on what was the crime. So I think you talk about Chauvin, for example, he probably would get support, right? But I think there will be members of any community who would take umbrage with someone who was, of course, a convicted felon who escaped prison. But there are going to be some in those communities who would actually support, advocate, and provide refuge and protection for said individual. So I think that's something to consider. I'm glad to be back, brother. Glad to be back. Sister Shai states, keep Larry in jail. I'm sorry. So tap in, Sister Shai. Tap in. I know you're shy, but you know you can cam up. You don't have to cam up to be part of the conversation. You can use a pseudonym, as you are well aware. Tap in. Let us know your thoughts in terms of why you would like to keep Larry in jail. And Sister from Maryland, I hope you could tap back in as well. I hope you simply dropped off due to technical issues. So I'm going to put the link once again in the chat, family. Also, as you know, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. You're watching LaboombaSpeaks.com, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we believe we gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black in conjunction with Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. And we're having a conversation this Friday afternoon regarding the question is, what does Larry Hoover's commutation mean for the Black community? So, family, tap in, be part of the conversation. Defender Logic would love to hear from you. Of course, Zongo Native would love to hear from you as well. Sister Shai, you know, you're always welcome. And then, of course, last but not least, hopefully we could get the sister back in as well. Also, family, of course, we're live with Bequaline Network. Bequaline Network, as you all know, is the Pan-African social media extraordinaire and the home of African-centered news and information. So make sure you tap in, subscribe, hit the like button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit the notification bell and share, and of course, be a blessing to the show by hitting the super chat and of course the Cash App. LMA. So if you had the power now as the governor of Illinois, would you commute Larry Hoover's sentence and let him go, set him free?
That is a tough one, bro. That is a tough one. I don't know. I would maybe try to get him into a nicer facility.
Okay.
Put him on probation.
Why?
I don't know. One, I mean, well, I guess his age, you know, his advanced age. Yeah, he's like 70 something, right?
But that's one of the consequences, right? If you are the head of an organized crime syndicate and you receive life in prison, right? If you've been convicted of deleting people, that comes with it.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. I would, like I said, I wouldn't be upset if he was to not, but if he was to have to remain in state prison, I mean, like I said, yeah, he did run a organization. I mean, like I said, that would be a tough one for me. Probably leaning towards no, but you know, I would have to look at the murder conviction. Like, what was the murder? Like, if it was just, you know, I hate to be like, how can I put it? Put value on certain people's lives or whatever. But if it's like gang on gang violence, you know, I would put it this way: my highest level of you know sense of accountability when it's like a gang member attacks, you know, like robs somebody, breaks into someone's home, you know, steals, kills, or whatever, like almost like a non-combatant, right? But if it's like gang on gang, I'm a little bit more lenient on that because it's kind of like, it's almost like what's what I'm looking for, mutual combat in a sense, right? Um, but like when if you start going after like almost like civilians, almost like when you're at war, right? You have two countries going to war. Like as a soldier, you can attack other soldiers, but you can't attack civilians. And so if this is just like some gang stuff, I can kind of let that slide. Not let that slide, but I could be a little bit more lenient on that. But if he was convicted of killing like, unaliving, sorry about that. If he was convicted of unaliving, like I said, just a civilian bystander, somebody who was, like, let's say he was trying to do some little criminal enterprise and there was like just a community member that was trying to stand in his way to keep the drugs out and stuff like that. Like if he went up, if he ended up doing something to someone like that, yeah, then I'll be like, okay, lock you up, throw away the key. But if it's just some gang on gang stuff, I don't put too much value on that.
Okay.
Not to be like your life is less valuable, but you were in the game, you know what you were doing.
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know. What about you?
I would say no. I would say no. I think there have been a number of crime bosses who were sentenced to federal crimes, state crimes, in which the sentence was life, and they weren't released, irrespective of their failing health in advanced age, right? One person I think of that everyone is familiar with is John Gotti, who, of course, at one point was known as the Teflon Don due to his seemingly uncanny ability to beat federal cases, right? So that's my position. I would argue no. We, of course, in the Black community, unfortunately, know the adverse effect of gang violence, it's just organized crime. Organized crime in itself is extremely problematic, and it touches and harms those who aren't involved in organized crime, right? Particularly, we start talking about running rackets and extortion, right? There's oftentimes even a fear of reprisal if one even speaks out against the behavior that is tearing their community apart, right? And so I would argue absolutely not. And once again, I've listened to some interviews that Mr. Hoover's given. He's articulate, right? He's a slick tongue car salesman, as one would say, where he could talk about power in one instance, and then the next day still be running, of course, this type of gang, this criminal organization. And so what we tend to find is it's almost like the Robin Hood dynamic, right? Yes, I'm robbing Peter, of course, to pay Paul. The individuals that you're robbing, that you're literally destroying their lives and sucking the hope from are, of course, Black people. So it just doesn't play for me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Like I said, I don't know too much about what he did. Like I said, other than the criminal organization, yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. What you said, that's probably, I would say, probably where it needs to land. Yeah, because because like I said, and that's the one thing too. Like we romanticize this kind of crime and criminal, and I think for some people they can, when you're not around it and you're just watching it on TV, it's kind of like everyone loves The Wire until you actually live in Baltimore in the 90s, and then like you have to deal with that every day.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? In the 90s and 2000s, everyone, it's all fun when you're watching it on TV, but when you're actually living in the streets and you can't go to the grocery store without fear that, what I'm saying, that one of these little knuckleheads are going to, people call them YNs. I like to call them YM for young and misguided. So, one of these YMs run up on you and now, they're, you're in a life or death situation, So I do need to put that into account. Yeah. Cause like I said, and I do think that maybe this should, I don't know if it's going to act as a deterrence, but it needs to be, something, unless they can make a deal with him that says, okay, we're going to let you out, but you have to tell your men, what I'm saying, to turn over, like turn over a new leaf. Like if they listen to you, you're going to have to, I don't know if that's even possible. I don't know how it even works, but if he has the pull that he has, he would have to say, okay, we're going to clean up the neighborhood. We're going to stop selling drugs. We're going to do, if you have all these people who said they're going to, dedicating their lives to this man, then, do some good. Tell them, turn around and say like, okay, no more drugs, cleaning up the neighborhoods, providing free, I don't know how to, if they're not selling drugs anymore, I know they're going to get the money, but, figure out some way to do good in their community. And, maybe, but like I said, this is a tough one for me. But I like what you said. I think that's probably the best bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would concur. But, this is what happens. I think hopefully this will be a sign to, of course, young people not to throw your lives away. But I mean, what do we make of Trump, right? Of course, he takes his position that he's tough on crime, yet he has been exonerating individuals who have been convicted of some of the most egregious crimes that we've even seen.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, one, you can't put anything past Trump, and two, you can't, trust anything he says. You know what I'm saying? Like if he says he's against criminals, like tomorrow he's going to, he'll be giving them $1 million if it means that he can get reelected or whatever. So to me, they had no principles. But I think it's just, he's just trying to figure out a way to, make it work for him. So I think he's just trying to, I think he's, because like I said, I think he realized he got his ear to the ground, and he realized that freeing Larry Hoover would be, what's what I'm looking for, beneficial to him. Like I feel like he knows that he has enough fame, like Larry Hoover has enough supporters that could, sway an election, right? So if he can, I don't know. Like I said, with Trump, you never know what's going through his head. So
right.
I wouldn't put too much into it, or at least I wouldn't allow this to allow. Now, if he really, well, actually he can't because he has state charges. But I don't even know who he could have done who has federal charges that we would have. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know who he could commute that would give me pause. Like, because most of the people I think of, they got, they're all, state level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I didn't look up who's on the federal registry and see who's. See who's up there because because like that's the thing that sucks because like I remember a couple of years ago, Mark Lamont Hill was talking about Mumia Abu-Jamal. Where is he? Is he
Yes.
in Chicago? Or is he in
now
New
that's
York? He's in
someone
Chicago,
who
right?
needs to be commuted. Absolutely. Let me look that up.
Yeah, but I know he's I think he's in either. Who was the state that had the blind governor? He was a black guy. He was blind.
Yeah, that was in New York.
I think that was in New York. Now, so I think Mamia's in New York.
Yeah, he's on death row. I don't know if he's a federal prisoner. Let's see. Defense.
No, he's in state.
Yeah, he's in state. Yeah.
No, he's in Philadelphia. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he's in Philadelphia. And Mark Lamont Hill was talking about when he was in. Where does it say he's in prison at? Yeah, I guess he's at Philadelphia. And I guess Philadelphia had that one blind mayor, and he was only a one-term, mayor, and just like, look, man, you're one term. Go ahead and do this, commutation or this.
But here's the thing: a mayor can't commute a sentence. That has to be a governor.
Oh, man, maybe he was. No, I don't think it was the governor. Oh, okay. Let me look it up. Maybe I misspoke. But yeah, I mean, but if it's someone on his level, that has some federal cases. I'm pretty sure maybe there's some old Black Panthers or whatever that were that had some federal charges. I'm not sure.
Yeah, his life sentence was overturned by the federal court, so he's serving life in Frankville, Pennsylvania, right now.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 71.
Okay, let me see. Yeah. It was it a blind governor or was he a blind? I think it was.
But here's the thing: he was an actual political activist, right? And
Yeah.
what we're finding, you know this better than I. If you are someone who has advocated, worked for the, of course, liberation of Black people, you're not getting out of
Mhm.
prison. Now, if you were someone
What's that?
running amok, if you was a wild boy out here turning up and destroying your community, there's a possibility that they would do what? They would give you a compassionate release. But if you're actually working to better our community, please, you're not getting out.
Yeah. That seems to be the case. Yeah.
I can't name anybody who, the only person I can even think of that received a compassionate release was Mumia, not Mumia, Mutulu Shakur. And that's because he had terminal cancer and only had a couple weeks to live.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy I was thinking about is Davey.
He was granted parole back in 2022, but of course he was 85 years old.
Yeah.
So his entire life had really been taken away from him.
Yeah, I was thinking of David Patterson. He was the 55th governor of New York. So when Elliot Spitzer got in his trouble, chasing all the prostitutes, he came in, and I think he was only short. He was, only for a short period of time, and it was just like, look, man, you're only gonna be here for one. You're gonna be doing this for one term, so you might as well just, get some. There's some folks in prison. Go ahead and commute them. But like you said, even if the cost to you is low, it's not like you're gonna be running for anything anymore anytime soon. You know what I'm saying? They still won't do it. So that's. Yeah, but yeah, there's like other people I wish he would have did. I mean, like I said, we definitely have what's what I'm looking for, an unhealthy love affair with criminals, the criminal element. Right. That's just America in general, but particularly for us, I think it comes back on us tenfold because when the activity that gets you paid and gets you laid also destroys the community, you're in bad trouble.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and these are issues that we have to address because this is something we face on a diurnal basis. This is something that we have to address with young people, that we have to, look to console with, of course, the brothers and sisters in the community who family members have been incarcerated, so on and so forth. So Black Canadian, you state that you agree with Sister Shai. I appreciate that. Hopefully you could tap in and be part of the conversation. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. We'd love to hear from a brother or a sister from, of course, Canada, right? And I've been to Canada. I went to Toronto for my birthday. So definitely would love to hear from you regarding this issue as well. So make sure you tap in. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. So these are real issues, but I would argue that, and I get it. A lot of times individuals are young, you could kind of be, drawn to the allure, right, of the criminality, particularly when you're younger. And I'm quite sure, LMA, you're familiar, being out there in the hustle and bustle is exhilarating.
Yeah.
Right. So, but once again, this is why it's important to have strong family units to curtail and turn young people away from that and into something productive. So.
Yeah, that's it right there. But like I said, I think it's, especially when you have people, well, Kanye West is kind of a, not like, modern Kanye, but like Kanye of, of what, 2012 or whatever, but he's always been pushing it. And when like I said, how do you steer a young man or young child or whatever into something productive when I don't want to use the pillars, but the high profile members of our society are, rooting for,
Well, yeah, and I know where you're going, and I think of the wisdom of Malcolm X, right? We know that we just celebrated his 100th birthday, and one of his daughters, of course, was in my hometown in Dayton, Ohio, of course, speaking about the 100th birthday and the work and legacy of her father. So there's a couple things, right? One of the things that Malcolm X taught us is that these celebrities, these entertainers, these trumpet players, these musicians, these
comedians,
they're what? They're one, they're puppets, and two, they're clowns.
Yeah.
Right. And so I articulate that to my children. It's something I did with my son very early. I say, we don't look up the athletes unless there's someone like Muhammad Ali, a Kaepernick, someone like that who's actually revolutionary, who's black-minded, and is willing to speak that publicly, right? Not just black-minded in black spaces, but you're willing to, be proud of who you are at all times. I said, and two, we don't look up to entertainers in any way, shape, or form. My son said, but you're a big Nas fan. I said, I'm a fan of Nas's music. I ain't never met him. I don't know what he's about.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have to set that example first and foremost. Yeah. But we also know that you control the process, but not the results. But I would make the argument that if you're doing the work, more often than not, you're going to make the shot, the child will end up going down the right path rather than the wrong one.
Mm-hmm. No, that's definitely fair. Yeah.
So just something for the family.
Yeah. Like I said, I think it's gonna be interesting, but like I said, this could be, to Trump's point, just a gesture, right? Because if Trump knows that I can commute this guy, but he's not getting out, it's almost like he didn't commute him at all, right? Mm-hmm. So it could just be,
I tried, but my hands were tied.
I tried, but my hands were tied by these Democrats because these Democrats don't believe in second chances. And now, like I said, it's all political.
I do.
Yeah.
Right. But I do, and that's why we're giving Chauvin a second chance. Like I stated, one of the individuals in his orbit, in his circle, even articulated that they believe that he was wrongfully convicted. And of course, we know on the right, they argue that the only reason he was convicted was because people are afraid that the city of Minneapolis would, of course, implode on itself if he was exonerated.
Yep. Like I said, I made a post of this, during the time frame. It's just like, listen, man, it's cheaper to just not kill black people. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just cheaper. Like, you got to, pay for all of this, destruction, and, like, it's just cheaper just to not, kill folks.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, I do think that would be, because even if he were I think it would be the same thing with Chauvin. If he gets turned over, I mean, if he gets commuted or whatever on this federal case, he would still have to do the state case,
correct, right?
The time of the state, right? But I don't even know who's the governor of Minneapolis. So they, like I said, they may.
You mean Minnesota? The governor of Minnesota, yeah. Yeah, I don't know who the governor of Minnesota is either, but I would make the presumption that the governor of Minnesota is a Democrat. But once again, I mean, these are situations in which you have individuals I'm sorry, go right ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, the crimes are so heinous. I mean, I would be irrespective of who, what political party, I would have to say, what the French toast are you doing, right? This is a person who should be granted a release, right? So just something to consider there. Those are my thoughts. But once again, family, listen, it's more of a PR move. So Defender of Logic says he believes it's more of a PR move. Tap in, let us know why you say that. We'd love to hear from you, brother, regarding why you believe this is more so a PR move than anything. I think you're echoing some of the sentiments of Brother LMA, right? But I definitely would want to hear from you regarding why you believe it is a PR move. So tap in, be part of the conversation. Y'all know who it is. It's LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage for always betting on Black, in conjunction, of course, with Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire in the home of African-centered news and information. And once again, family, please do not be shy regarding being a blessing to the show. Of course, you can hit the super chat and, of course, Cash App. We look forward to your continued support. And we're discussing what does Larry Hoover's commutation mean for the Black community. But Defender of Logic, let me know if you could log in, if you could tap in. Once again, you do not have to cam up to be part of the show. And as you know, you can use a pseudonym to be part of the conversation. So I'd love to hear from you before we close things out. So any other thoughts from you, Brother LMA?
Not at the moment. I think that I don't know. Like I said, defender of logic. That was the brother's name. Was it brother of logic or defender of logic?
Defender of logic.
Yeah, I'm kind of going along with what he says. Yeah, I think that this is a PR move. Like I said, I can't imagine that Trump would spend so much time talking about Haitians eating dogs, cats and dogs, and then migrate criminal gangs or whatever, just so he could, what he talked about MS-13 and Tren de Agua, just for him to release the leader of, a criminal gang in Illinois. In Chicago. So, because, it's always the Republicans always crying about Chicago. What about Chicago? What about Chicago? And now he's releasing was it the Gangster Disciples? So I think it's a PR move. I mean, then again, the man has no principles. So he's letting, a bunch of Afro squatters, people call them Afrikaners, I call them Afro squatters, coming into the country. So, I mean, I don't know. He just kind of, I don't know. He's almost like, what was it? I think it was the Dark Knight, or that movie, Batman movie, Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
Heath Ledger's Joker says, I don't have a plan. I just do things.
Yeah, I just do things. That's one of my favorite movies, by the way.
Yeah, that instant classic. Yeah.
Instant. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great movie.
Absolutely. He said, but
that's what I think of Trump. He's just,
if someone says a gang member is going to be killed, no one cares. He says, I'm going to say one little lawyer is going to die. Everyone loses their mind. They freak out. Yeah. So something to consider there. So I see you, brother. You say you're from the UK, by the way. Appreciate you tapping in, coming across the pond virtually to be part of the conversation. If this is your first time logging on, tapping into Lumumba Speaks or Beacon Network, make sure you subscribe, like, share, hit the notification bell for both channels. Of course, we are a Pan-Africanist network, so we appreciate having you here. So yes, brother, you're familiar with H. Rap Brown. You're familiar with Mumia Abu-Jamal. But Larry Hoover's arrest was not political. He was a gang leader in Chicago who, of course, was convicted of murder in the 1970s, then was convicted in federal court in 1997 for running the criminal enterprise while he was incarcerated. So definitely appreciate you tapping in, brother. Be part of the conversation. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Of course, you do not have the camera to be part of the conversation. Look like you played football. I played football as well. So definitely love to have that type of energy on the platform. Go right ahead, brother LMA.
No, I think that was it. Like I said, I think that Trump is just kind of, randomly doing stuff. Some good, some bad. Like I said, he got Kilpatrick right before his last, I don't know if he did any, he did a couple of black, he exonerated a couple of people that were black. Let me see.
Do you think Kilpatrick should have been?
I'm not familiar with, I'm not familiar too much. I know he did have some corruption. I know he was wilding out there.
Criminal enterprise from the mayor's office.
See, I didn't know about that. I knew he was I knew it was just like some corruption stuff, but I didn't know it was I have to look that up. Like, what was his case?
Yeah, there's a great episode on Kilpatrick on American Greed. You can look it up on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there was an allegation that he had a exotic dancer unalived because she would have been. So there was a lot going on, going on.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you definitely have to check that out. Definitely need to check that out. 100%. 100%. So, but this is where we are. It's going to be rather difficult, right? I think these next few years, we know they're coming up with the big, beautiful bill where they're seeking to allow Trump to suspend elections, right? And keep him in office in relative perpetuity. So this is going to be a curious time for America. As we know, it's going to be an extremely curious time for Black people in America. As we know, when times are lean for America, it's a drought for Black America. So definitely something that we need to, be keen and cognizant of. But I also think, what we find with Trump, and I think you're right about this, there really is oftentimes no rhyme or reason for what he's doing. Right. And so that is an issue of concern as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe, yeah. Oh, okay. I was looking at the list of clemency and leniency and all stuff. He pardoned Susan B. Anthony. I guess illegal voting, so the $100 fine and the cost of prosecution. So he commuted that. So yeah, it's quite.
Go right ahead.
No, I'm just looking at some of the lists. I was just see if there's any other names that I recognize. Yeah, some of the people I don't recognize, but yeah, it's quite the list. Yeah, so yeah, but no, I think this is a good bill. Like I said, I gave me a lot of perspective. Like like I said, I heard of Larry Hoover's name. I kind of want to give second chances, but at the same time, you got to be held accountable for your actions. And like I said, it's one thing, like you mentioned, we have a issue of romanticizing, this criminal element until, it's all fun and games. Everyone loves to dance to the music and, throw up free, Hoover signs or whatever until you can't go outside without the threat of being, some little YM running up on you,
Right.
So,
or a child, unfortunately, being the victim.
Yeah. Or if it's your family member that's strung out on drugs, sold to them by this network. So yeah, I think, we need to be careful of that, not to romanticize that shit. But I understand, like I said, there's the flip side. Like I said, we are a targeted, plundered people who, a lot of times on the wrong side of the tracks or whatever. So, economic security can be precarious. So, sometimes you may decide to do things that, are highly frowned upon to make ends meet. So I can understand that pressure, not excusing it, but I'm just saying I understand the pressure. And so, like I said, it's a tough one, but, I don't want to, be out here, celebrating criminals.
Right, and I understand completely, and that is something that happens. Like we talk about the young lady, well, not the young lady because she's 70 years old, that became Trump's pardon czar. Right, she was a mother of 5. She was married. She was working at FedEx. Had worked at FedEx for over a decade. Not excusing the behavior, but what took place was she ended up being laid off from FedEx. Ended up going through a divorce. And now she was a single mother of 5. As you know, most times when there's a divorce, the mother's going to receive custody. And her house was foreclosed, and she found herself in a situation desperate for cash and began to become involved in, of course, money laundering and drug distribution.
Was this a Black lady?
Yes. And
okay.
So, yeah. And the point is, and she was about 50 years old when she was convicted, is oftentimes, unfortunately, right, a lot of times people turn to what industries as a result of being unable to provide substantial income legally.
Yep.
That is a reality.
Yeah.
If you haven't, as a matter of fact, if you ever get a chance to read the book, The Other Westmores, right? This is a book about, of course, part of the book chronicles the life of Westmore, of course, Maryland governor. But then there's another brother who, of course, had the same name, who grew up maybe 2 blocks from the now Maryland governor. Talked about their lives end up going on different trajectories. But the other brother who's serving life in prison, at the time he had got in some trouble with the law. He got his life together, went to Job Corps, learned to trade, comes back home, but he still wasn't making enough money to actually make ends meet. And that caused him to go back out into, of course, the drug trade, and led to him engaging in activities that caused him to receive life in prison.
Yeah. And like I said, it's how do you like I said, it's just there's systematic. There's almost like uh, when it's a systematic fault like this. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to excuse criminality, but there's a point in which the deck is stacked against you so much that, like I said, it's either you starve or you go sell this, whatever, or no, you starve or your children starve, or you take the risk and you go sell this, this bag real quick, And luckily, I'm not in that situation. Knock on wood, I'm never in that situation,
Right.
But
Absolutely.
like I said, that's why I'll always have not a soft spot, but an understanding spot of certain levels of criminality. Not say you shouldn't be
Absolutely.
held accountable,
Right.
but
Right.
I always have like a sense of, I understand the circumstances that put you in this, the set of circumstances and events
In
that put you
particular.
in this situation.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not always your fault. You could have made better choices,
Yes.
but sometimes it's just the deck is stacked against you and you got two shitty choices and you just pick one and this is the cards that you would deal. Because there's a lot of people who've also committed crimes who just never got caught,
This is
and they
very
had
true.
the chance
Very true.
and they
Very
had the chance to walk, survive. Times got better and they were able to walk away, without being caught. And then other people who just, aren't so lucky. So,
right.
I think I ain't gonna say
Absolutely. So
we've
very
done
quick.
things that, had we ran across the wrong police officer at the wrong time, we'd be jammed up right now.
Right. So very quickly, LMA Gazekbo, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I just need you to cam up in queue before I could bring you to live, just to make sure you're not trolling. Okay, appreciate you, brother. You could turn your camera off or leave it on. I'm going to bring you in. All right, very good. And
Good
how do I
evening. How you
pronounce your
doing?
name?
So my last name is Gadzipo. It's
Gazekbo.
it's Ghanaian.
Okay, very good.
So the
So
K is silent.
very quickly, what part of Ghana are you from?
No, well, my dad's from Ghana. I actually grew up in the West Indies. So I
Okay.
grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's a very colored history.
Okay, Trinidad and Tobago. So we're talking about Port of Spain?
Port of Spain, that's right.
Very good.
That's where I grew up. And then I emigrated to the UK where I live now. And that is me in the picture.
Okay. Look
I
like
used
the
to play-
DN to me.
No, offensive tackle, actually. I trimmed up.
Okay,
I used to
gotcha.
weigh like 300. I used to weigh like maybe 360.
Okay.
But I
Woo.
leaned down to about, maybe in that picture I was about 280 at then.
Okay.
At the
And how
time.
tall are you?
I'm like 6'8".
Okay, not bad, not bad. Yeah, I played football, semi-pro, but I never talked trash on offensive, defensive linemen. I was like, they're just too big. Too big. I could go across the middle. I could crack a linebacker all day. But those offensive and defensive linemen, I'm like, y'all got it. Y'all can have it. Very
Yeah,
good.
we like to scrap in the trenches.
Yes, sir.
But no,
Yes.
no. So my thing is, like, I've seen rumblings of obviously Larry Hoover being released, or sorry, his stay being commuted. And I saw earlier they were talking about, like, I think towards the beginning of the year there was another high-profile prisoner that was being released as well. But figures like H. Rap Brown or Mumia Abu Jamal or like Asada Shakur is still on the wanted list. Like,
Yes.
why aren't actually relevant and non-guilty political prisoners not being released? Like, what?
Right.
I don't
And
understand.
I think that's the point. And Brother LMA mentioned this, and hopefully you could tap back. He could tap back in.
I have to go back to that, yeah, because I lost connection for a bit.
When individuals are actually convicted of crimes and they're political prisoners and they're socially conscious and actually working to better the Black community, to restore African people to our traditional greatness, they're never given a reprieve legally.
Yeah.
But you can have individuals running around indiscriminately shooting up the block, right? They let them out quick, fast, and hurry. And of course, people know I'm not Christian, but it reminds me of the story of Jesus and Barnabas.
Right.
I mean, seriously here, though. Like, give us Barnabas, the criminal. We want this guy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh my gosh, subhanallah. No, so yeah, I just think it's like they're playing in our face for real. I mean, I live halfway across the world, but it still affects me, like, to see what's going on there. And then obviously the media that I consume would be different to yours. So some of the things that I see are like, well, a lot is being pushed onto like Palestine at the moment and Gaza and
Yes.
stuff like this. And there's like a sharp turn that's happened over the past couple weeks where people are starting to condemn the Israeli government now.
Yes.
And I think even in that there's huge cynicism that's going on, which is why I bring it up. It's a cynicism of those that are in power or in charge, powers that shouldn't be, as it were. And I don't get it. Like, how is it that we have allowed ourselves to fall back so much from what we used to be? Because you hear the stories of, well, even in that there's the stories of our antecedents in the 60s, 70s, the 50s, 60s, 70s. Like there were people who mobilized, who organized and did things, and they didn't have to be big things. They were just like free school meals and stuff like that the Panthers were doing. That's a huge thing. But nowadays, it seems everyone's just so insular. Like everyone just cares about their own little bubble,
Right.
and it feels like there's not much sense of community anymore. I mean, we all recognize that there's a problem, and like I think if you look at what happens with our economies, for instance, our forefathers would have probably been in the streets rioting over the cost of living. Like egg in the US, like eggs costing what, $10-12 a dozen now?
$10. I went to the grocery store and said, let me put this back. You know, I mean, seriously.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how we've been sort of walked. We've been allowed to sleepwalk into the situations that we're in. Like what do you see? How do you think that we can wake up, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. DOL, Defender of Logic, says complacency, contentment, distraction. I think you're cooking with fish grease, brother. I hope Defender of Logic can tap in, be part of the conversation. Because of course, I don't have all the answers.
No, of course not.
Reviews, glad I finally caught a stream after so long. Yeah. So, it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
One thing I could think of is, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. William Cross's Nigrescence theory, right? He argues that Black people, particularly here in the West, in the United States, develop a healthy Black identity after having some type of traumatic experience that teaches them, that makes them aware of anti-Black racism, right? Then they go on this journey to develop a healthy Black identity. Most people use the life and political trajectory of Malcolm X as an example of that. I push back against that argument. I argue that you can develop that sense of self, a healthy sense of self, and I think you can speak to this brother as a Ghanaian transplant from birth, if that's something that you're taught and raised in.
Yeah, definitely. Right? I mean, I'll give you a piece of my history, right? So growing up in Trinidad, like the demography in Trinidad and Tobago is like 40% African descent, 40% Indian descent, and 20% pretty much everything else, right? So I grew up and I emigrated from there at the age of 15 to the UK. So for the majority of my life growing up, the only sort of aspects of racism that I would have seen or really felt in reality would have been consumed from American media. I wasn't really othered in Trinidad per se, unless there's like a faint sort of rift between the Indian demography and the African demographic there, but it's not too serious. Like we get along really well. We basically call ourselves Trinidadian. When I came to UK though, and I went to like high school there, it was the first time I actually really felt othered because I was like one of two Black boys in a school of 800 boys, and this is like sort of like an upper middle class school as well, right? So it's like a private school, and because I've been so trained to look out for the racism that has come from an American perspective, because obviously Black people have lived amongst white people there for hundreds of years, whereas in the UK it's not the same. Like it exists, but it's very subtle. It's not the same sort of, like, you won't necessarily be called out your name, stopped by the police, or stopped from being able to purchase a house in legislature. but the effects of those things can still happen. It's just not codified, if that makes sense.
Right.
So like my experience, I had to learn what it was, because I never saw myself necessarily as black, or I just saw myself as a person growing up, like walking around. I'm amongst people, okay, and I experienced white people as well. It's not to say I didn't, because in Trinidad I did before coming here. And it's like I didn't notice or didn't feel particularly less than or different from other people. Even here, I only recognized that racism was happening to me sort of in retrospect. So after the effects, I was like, wait a minute, he said some slick stuff to me. I
So
did not expect that.
microaggressions,
Yeah.
which happens a lot, oftentimes, right? And I don't mean to cut you off, but I made that point to state that my view is that in order to, once again, as you mentioned, address these issues, what went wrong is the fact that I would make an argument on a macro level, not in our individual homes, but on a macro level in the community globally. We aren't focusing on who we are, right? Our history, and what is our mission in life, right? And I'll argue, what you want to do for a career, that part of that is our goal is to bestow our people to our traditional greatness.
No, but our histories, that's the thing, because we've been divorced from our histories. So like my personal history is so diverse, because my father is directly from Ghana, right? I can tap into like that tribe and everything like that. Like I know where that lineage is from. But on my mom's side, my mom was born and raised in the West Indies, right? And so if I were to say, okay, what tribe or what lineage does my mother's side go back to, I couldn't tell you. And then that's the case for so many foundational Black Americans, right? It's like there's so many origins that it can be from, and then to say West Africa generally is not necessarily good enough, because there's so many different tribes across West Africa, each with their own histories, each with their own.
Real quick, brother, we use the term ethnic group rather than tribe. Tribe.
Oh, my apologies. No.
Yeah, we use the term ethnic group. Also, we use the term, because this is a Pan-Africanist organization here, African American rather than Black American. We are very proud, because
that's brilliant, because I'm not very well versed in all this sort of stuff.
I know, but on the macro, people say Black American, but no, I'm an African American.
I love to hear that.
Yeah, so absolutely. But go right ahead.
No, what I mean by that is, like, I think a big piece to all of it is trying to find identity. Because we have a common ancestry, we have a common history. It's trying to find out what that is. And I guess because of our particular, and I say our, because of the particular situation of African Americans, there needs to be a unifying, because you are your own culture. You are your own culture there. Like that is uniquely yours. From whenever it was 16, 19, thank you. From then on, it's uniquely yours. Like no other group has experienced that, and to that extent. You see what I mean? So like that unfortunate trauma is, I suppose, what can be bound upon, but we need to celebrate it in a way, I suppose. I don't know if that makes sense.
I would push back a little bit. I'm not a fan of trauma bonding.
Neither am I. No, I don't. But the thing is, like, how if it is that we need to look back to find a common anchor, what would you base it on?
And I'm glad you asked that question. And then SSR, I'm gonna let you tap in. So what we tend to find, particularly in the number of African American, and really you could say Pan-Africanist movements, from Martin Delaney to Marcus Garvey to Malcolm X to the OAAU to Carlos Cooks, who of course was from the Dominican Republic, but of course was the ideological child of Marcus Garvey. It's this push of African ties, African history, African cultural attention. right? We even find that in the West Indies, right? In terms of, we talking about slave insurrections, right? The focus was, the impetus was African cultural retention. We talk about the Haitian Revolution, which, you know, most people know I can wax poetically ad nauseum about, right? The basis was African cultural retention. So I would argue, and at least for me, what helped me turn the corner from being a miscreant, someone who had an unhealthy racial identity, someone who identified with what I saw on television, to understanding who I truly was and having that greater sense of purpose in my life, was, of course, me learning my history, having a connection to Africa, right? And then, of course, from that, of course, sprung, of course, Pan-Africanism.
Right. No, that's incredible stuff. And then what I've noticed, you may have noticed in my title, there's Arabic there. So
Yes, sir.
I'll spell it out for you. So the bit to the far right, that's Bilal. That's Ba.
I'm familiar with Bilal.
Alif Lam. Yeah, so Bilal, right?
He was
the middle bit. Sorry.
He was the first caller to prayer.
That's right. All right. Well, the first appointed caller to prayer by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Then the middle bit is a nickname that's been given to me, An-Nakhla, which basically means the palm tree.
Okay.
Because I'm quite tall, right?
Right. I would say that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Gatsipo is my, or Gajakbong, as it's pronounced, is my name, like on my passport or whatever, right? And so, like, I embraced Islam when I came to the UK, and learning about history and things like the slave revolts and uprisings, I can't help but shake. And then coming in, like, I learned about Malcolm X way after actually becoming Muslim. Like, what I knew about Malcolm X was the film from Spike Lee back in the 90s, right?
That's for most people. Yeah.
Then I was educated by the autobiography. Then after that, there's a scholar who does African studies in the UK here, called Kehinde Andrews. I don't know if you've heard of the name.
I haven't heard of him, but I am familiar with a couple brothers over there and sisters over there who put in work.
Right. Yeah. No. So he's recently written a book. It's called Nobody Can Give You Freedom. And he revises part of the propaganda that was done against Malcolm X, right? Okay. Where the story that's told of him, they try to encapsulate him as a rebel who's reformed by the religion, and then goes out to Mecca and comes back and be like, okay, Whitey's not so bad, and let's all sing cool.
Yeah, that's not the case at all. Yeah,
but that was not his message. What he argues in his book is that the story that we're given. Book? Sorry,
you already have the book?
I do have the book. Yeah, I got a signed copy of his. Yeah.
Okay, because I see here in the States, I can't get it till September.
Right. No, but there's a documentary as well on YouTube. If you can look it up as well, which talks about it as well. He even interviews Mark Lamont Hill and all that stuff. So he traveled extensively to get it done. Yeah. So he argues that what was divorced from the message of Malcolm X was the actual political aspect of his message, in that the propaganda that was spread was basically to essentially quell the actual dangerous bit to the establishment, which is the politics side of it, not necessarily the reformation of the individual, but the actual movement of Pan-Africanism. Because a lot of what Malcolm X did was traveling across Africa, trying to build ties and bonds.
Yes, we're not trying. He actually did. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, he did. Yeah, and that's been essentially suppressed since his assassination.
Absolutely. Listen, real quick, I gotta say, I'm happy we got a new brother here tapping in, cooking with fish grease. I hope you could be a regular contributor, of course, to Lumumba Speaks of Equaline Network. But just wanted to say that it's great to get new brothers and sisters who are able to tap in, who are actually knowledgeable, and we can have a constructive, healthy, incisive conversation rather than oftentimes a snapshot reviews, defensive logic, and other brothers and sisters are aware. We have to push people out because they are not only ignorant, but also seeking to sow discord amongst brothers and sisters. So I just want to say that.
Oh no, thank you. I've been a subscriber for some time. It's my first time tapping in, sort of thing.
Okay.
So, and I don't want to take too much shine. I'm sure Snapchat's
Snapchat is he's in the UK as well.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, cool. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, no, nice to meet you, brother. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? You all right?
I'm fine, thank you, man.
Yeah, long time no speak, Dr. Bakari. How you
Well,
doing?
I just getting settled out here in Cali, and so just the new job. It's been really busy, and so now since we're on summer semester, I have a lot more time, so I could get back to consistently
Cool.
doing the lives that we're doing. But I'm Dr. Lumumba. I'm working in the field. I'm the director of the Black Culture Center here, and
Yeah.
I'm just giving thanks.
Oh, cool, man. I think that was the last time I caught up with you, that you were moving out to California.
Yeah. It was before I actually was moving. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad it's going really well for you. I was just recently in New York and I visited the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center.
Yeah, it's like on 166th and Broadway.
Yeah, but it was like a day or two just before his 100th birthday. So I was kind of gutted because we were leaving that day, but it was good. They managed to give us a tour around and all that stuff. It was great.
Let me ask you this question real quick. How long was the flight from LA, from NYC to London?
It was about 6.5 hours.
Okay, 6 and woo. Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Nobody can give you freedom. So he already has the book. I just pre-ordered it on Amazon right now. So that's probably gonna be about my 20th book I have on Malcolm X. So yeah, absolutely. All right, but go ahead, snapshot.
Yeah, just very quickly, just before I go into the topic, just to piggyback on what you guys were just talking about, when it comes to just understanding a bit more about Black history and about your roots and stuff, my personal journey just started from tracing my family tree back as far as I could go. And then I know some people don't really believe in it, but I did my ancestry. That gave me some DNA clues as to what part of the continent that I'm made up from. Okay. And from then onwards, that just piqued my curiosity to find out more about those countries and their history and stuff like that. And I'm still learning. So, I think it's going to be a lifelong journey actually of just learning all of that. But I hope that helps you, Gads. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Gads. But I hope that helps you in.
You can call me Bilal or you can call me Ricard. Gads.
Okay. Oh, Bilal. Okay. Well, yeah. I hope that helps you, when you're trying to trace your lineage or find out more about Black or African history, I should say.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. So I just found out about this Larry Hoover thing, where that's the topic, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
He's being commuted. So the first time I ever heard about Larry Hoover was about a year, 18 months ago, when a friend come up to me and he said to me, "Oh, did you hear that Kanye West is doing some concert thing for this guy called Larry Hoover, and it'll be a really good thing if they can get him out of prison?" And I was like, "Well, who's this? Who's Larry Hoover? Who is he? What has he done or anything?" And then come to find out that the guy was the founder of one of the biggest criminal street gangs in the USA. And then I just said to my friend, "Well, what's so special about him? Why does he need to be pardoned or released if he's this hardened criminal that's been involved in, X amount of murders and drugs and all that kind of stuff?" And it just got me thinking that, there are Black Panthers in prison in the USA, and I don't see any sort of political movements trying to help get them out. And these are people that were trying to do good for their community for the most part that I could see. So my question is, why what is so special about this guy?
Okay, I'm sorry. Gazeppo, I think you said something real quick. I was trying to hear.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was saying that that's a similar point to what I was making, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I heard of Larry Hoover was Rick Ross's track. I think of Big Meech Larry Hoover. I was like,
Big Meech Larry Hoover. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Glamorizing criminals, of course.
So which was the gang that he started? Was that the GDs?
Gangster Disciples, absolutely, in Chicago.
And that's quite a large. I think they were quite large in number. I just done a quick wiki, and they had 30,000 members and stuff like that. And I'm just thinking,
that's crazy.
30,000 people could have been organized to do something a bit more positive, I would have hoped. But
if you could organize 30,000 people, it's obvious that he's a master organizer, right? This brother has real skills. In the New York Times article, they said that the organization was regimented, right? However, he chose to devolve and engage in criminal activity, create a criminal enterprise where if people engage if people acting in contravention of the rules of the game, oftentimes they were violent reprisals up to and including murder, or I'm sorry, unaliving people.
Yeah. Now,
from what
to
I
answer the
understand as well,
question-
sorry. From what I understand as well, with gangs like the GDs and others, they've also bastardized Islam to sort of make a code for how they live. So there's certain tenets that they live by, where like, okay, we don't eat pork and things like this, or like, and these are things that I've heard from someone who lives in Chicago, and they actually use different tenets that they've reformed for themselves, so like 5%ers and stuff like that, to try to distinguish themselves from other people. I think in terms of like because when we look back, they've sort of glamorized previous gangsters from the 70s and 80s, where there would be ones that, for instance, they do crud, like they do absolute like horrible things in the streets, like selling and pushing drugs and all that, or pimping and all that sort of stuff. But then every now and then they'll give away turkeys at Christmas and stuff like that, to try to have a
Right,
PR
you're talking about the
issue.
Robin Hood type thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think to an extent that sort of continues, where the nefarious activities that they commit are seen as sort of anti-establishment, where you have the establishment that oppresses you, and so you're still loved in the streets by the people you live amongst, even though you're causing like massive oppression where you actually are. What, like, how do we as a collective push back against that, like the damaging aspects of it?
You see, the thing is, right, people like that are always gonna find support and collect and stuff around people who, if their organization in a way is providing employment, if we can call it that, to copious numbers of people who are then dependent on it, they're gonna then rally to defend it, aren't they? That's just how that's the whole reason for giving out the turkeys and all of that, really. I mean, they don't really care if you've had something to eat at Christmas time or not. But I think, to answer the question that this stream is based on, what impact does this have on the black community? I think it's going to be something that's going to be political, because Trump, being a Republican, is going to say, I commuted this guy's sentence. It hasn't freed him, because I think Trump can only commute his sentence on federal charges.
Correct.
It will be the state that would have to exonerate him of those charges for him to be freed. And I think, is Illinois a blue state?
Yes, it is.
It is, right. So now, if the governor doesn't go along with it, for example, because I think it'll be down to the governor to
it looks like the governor won't go along with it.
Right. So now Trump can turn around and say, because he's going to believe that the black community want this guy free, or a section of the black community is going to want this guy free, he can then start splitting the numbers. Do you understand what I'm saying? He could use that, but that's going to then depend on the consciousness level of the African American community to say, well, why do we want this gangster free? How many black people is he responsible for the deaths of? Or how many families have been impacted by the drugs networks that he set up and all of that sort of stuff? So if the community is conscious enough to say, actually, we don't want this we don't want this ex-gangster freed, but we want these Black Panthers free, or someone who's in there in serving an unjust sentence freed, then that's going to be the only pushback. But if there's going to be a lot of people, like the people that was running behind Kanye West for this Free Larry Hoover concert and all of that, if those people have the microphone, it's going to be a case for Trump to be able to split that African American vote away from the Democrats, which is what I think is the play, really. I mean, what do you think about that, Dr. Lumumba? You're the American here, but you might have a better view on that than me.
Well, I'm an African American.
African American, sorry, yes. African American. Yeah.
I ain't red, white, and blue. I'm red, black, and green, brother. You know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, and brother LMA, he left the call. I think he had to go away. But he made the same argument earlier that this is political. This is political.
Yeah.
In nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of like Chicago and stuff, though, is the gangster disciple, is that still a thing, or is that just
Absolutely. I mean,
Oh, right.
yeah, absolutely. But so most people don't know about the case, and we got about 5 minutes, and we're gonna have to end things. But
No problem.
with the situation with Larry Hoover, he was convicted of murder. I'm sorry, unaliving someone back in the 1970s.
Okay.
Sentenced to 200 years in state prison. Yes. Give me 1 second.
No worries.
You-
Sorry, so snapshots. Which your accent sounds maybe like southeast.
Yeah, just outside London.
Right, got you. So Kent sort of area, right?
Yeah, where are you?
I'm in Surrey myself.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, cool.
That's nice to meet you, man.
Yeah. Is this the first time you've tapped in on one of his shows?
Yeah, it is. It is. I tend to watch stuff later on. I've never caught anything live before, but I thought that this was interesting, so I wanted to weigh in a little bit, find out a bit more.
Okay, my bad, family. Okay, I'm back. So of course I'm here in the office right now, so I had some students come by, but I told them I'd get with them in a few. So the question was, Larry Hoover. I'm sorry, he was convicted of unaliving either an individual or individuals in the 1970s, sentenced over 200 years in state prison. In 1997, he was convicted on federal crimes for continuing to run a criminal enterprise from state prison. And then he was taken from state custody and sent to the federal supermax in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
And they say that they still have evidence now that even while he's in the supermax in Colorado, he's still seeking to run the organization. Young men who are still on the streets of Chicago are still pledging their lives to him, calling them their king. He's their king, so on and so forth. So
this ties into groups like O Block and stuff, right?
What is O Block?
So there's and this I'm so devolved from this, but there's a musician, Lil Durk, I think maybe.
Yeah.
There's a group called an area in Chicago called O Block, I think, that they belong to. I don't know if they're connected to the GDs and all this.
Okay. Well, they probably are. They probably are.
Right.
They probably are.
And I think that speaks to how influential it is, because we're two people sitting in the UK.
Right, and you all know,
and have some knowledge, even though it's tertiary, like of what's going on there. It definitely is, from what I can assess, it definitely is a political move. Quite crafty, to be honest, but
absolutely.
I wonder how much benefit can actually be gained from. I mean, what are our solutions? Like, I think exploring third parties, because if he's trying to do this is try to devolve people from voting Democrat, I think they've already done that to themselves substantially. Like, I think more people sat and abstain from voting in the first place than trying to vote for any one particular party. I'm conscious we don't have a lot of time. And even in the UK, we're having similar issues politically where we don't know for whom to vote anymore, if at all, right? So we have, for instance, over here, the Conservatives and the Labour government, and the Labour government's moved so far right, where they were usually like centre or left of centre. They've moved so far right that they make they allow for the Conservatives to move even further right, and there's now a sort of fascist government that's coming in as well. Like our options really, instead of the duopoly type thing, is to really focus on local government. That was what I would suggest for America in particular. You've got your sort of midterms coming up, sort of thing, right, where you have to vote on local government.
Right.
I think a lot more can be affected and changed at that level.
I would agree. Yes, and there's something we always articulate here. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then things like collectives, or because the actual methods of the Panthers and stuff like that, it can be replicated.
Yes,
but we just need to be aware of infiltrators, I suppose, because that COINTELPRO has been a thing.
It's a real thing. I mean, but it's a real thing globally. I mean, I'm going to do a show tomorrow on Ibrahim Toure.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So hopefully you could tap in for
protect that
snapshot.
brother.
So we find that this is an issue globally.
Yeah.
Like with African people, because we're coming up on the 38th anniversary of Thomas and Carr's, assassination.
Yeah.
Right. So which is, and Thomas and Carr, as many of you know, was my son's favorite Pan-Africanist. And of course, Thomas and Carr was taken from us on my sister's 10th birthday.
Okay.
So let me see here. Defender of Logic. I think I'm going to do the stream on Thomas and Carr probably 2 or 3 p.m. my time. So of course,
and you're West Coast, right?
I'm on the West Coast. Yes.
Okay.
So that probably be what, 9 to 10. You all time?
What time is it where you are now?
It's 3:44 right now where I'm at.
Okay. Yeah.
What time is it in the UK right now?
1:45.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So I try to be mindful because I got brothers on sisters on the continent who tap in as well. So I'm trying to be mindful that when I start a show, it's at least in a time frame where people.
We're 8 hours. That's cool. That's fine. We're up now. It's
cool. Saturday night, so it should be all right.
Okay.
Tomorrow, so that should be all right.
Okay.
All right. Where do you stand on?
Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Where do you stand on the Larry Hoover?
My association. So the question I asked Brother LMA was, if you were the governor, right,
okay.
of Illinois.
Governor. All right, yeah.
Mr. Governor, right? If you were the governor of Illinois, would you commute his state sentence? And he shared the same sentiment as myself, and the answer would be absolutely not, under no conditions.
Actually, it would probably be to his safety to not commute his sentence as well, because if someone like that gets out, if he has been controlling things from within, I'm sure there are many people on the outside that want to get to him as well, right?
That's a good point. Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, matter of fact, not only is that a good point, to substantiate your point, many of you may be aware of the story of the 3 drug kingpins in Harlem back in the early 1990s, right? There was a movie made about it, Paid in Full, Cameron.
Oh, yeah.
Right, where he murked out Mekhi Phife, right?
I only recently saw that because they put the full film on
YouTube, for free. Yeah. So of course, what was his name? Chico, Pretty Rico, Poppin' Willies, and all that, right? So when he got out of prison, probably a couple years ago, as soon as he got out, guess what happened? Alpo, thank you, Defender Logic, Alpo. Yeah. And he was deleted on 122nd Street. Like you said, he got out, he goes back home, they got rid of his ass. You're absolutely right. Got him out of there, lit up his truck.
And it didn't, that's the thing, like the COINTELPRO, to that point, it's not as sophisticated, it doesn't need to be as sophisticated as it used to be. Like, we all are holding in our hands tools of subversion. Like we can be manipulated so easily from what we see. I can't trust videos anymore, even on YouTube and stuff. There's so many that are just like, you see like a thumbnail of something you're interested in with a headline, and you click into it, and it's about like maybe 5 seconds of actual footage, and then a diatribe from AI that's just keeping you engaged for 10 minutes on stuff that you already know. It's like,
and Snapshot and Defender Logic, typically when I do a show, I try to do some background research on the issue. Right? I try to read an article from a reputable source, right? So that when we having a conversation, it's rooted in facts, and then it's what can we do moving forward. Right. But I think that's one of the things that kind of sets our channel apart, myself and people on our network. But I think it's also one of the reasons why we have trouble growing, because we try to focus on facts and not feelings.
Okay, so Larry Hoover's been saying, I've been doing some work to get kids away from going down the wrong path, and
he's trying to pull the Stanley Tucci.
Yeah, right. And there are people that will say, "Oh, see, people like you, you wouldn't let Malcolm Little become Malcolm X because you won't like let the guy have a chance to."
Right.
And what do you respond when you hear that?
My response to that is one. There's a couple things, right? Malcolm Little became Malcolm X. Detroit Red became Malcolm X, and he became El Hajj Malik El Shabazz. I'm not opposed to that. I myself had a time in my life where I was a miscreant. I don't deny that, right? So this is not a situation where I'm trying to play the moral police, because I don't think I'm in a position to ever do that, right?
Right.
Second, we talk about someone like Stanley Tookie Williams, right? I've read Stanley Tookie Williams' memoir, of course, Blue Rage, Black Redemption. This is a man who actually was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for his anti-gang books to children. This is a man who was visited by Winnie Mandela. That's right, Winnie Mandela, while he was on death row in San Quentin, right? So this is someone who actually made a true pivot. What we find with Larry Hoover, and I'm standing on business when I state this, is that he talks a good game, but he's still engaging in running the criminal organization at the same time. Right. So when the cameras are in front of him, yes, this promotes black fratricide. You know, we need to be teaching our young people to be constructive and to build their communities and better their communities and be strong families. But then when the cameras leave and there's evidence to substantiate this is how he was convicted in 1997 of federal crimes, he's doing what? Right back. Hey, you better make sure those YNs they running this. I'm he got to show his allegiance to me, or it's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
What we talking about here?
Yeah.
Right. So we know, and brother Bilal, you can speak to this. A lot of people cosplay Black consciousness.
100%.
Right. I'm in Cali now. What's the guy? Aaron the plumber. They call him a certified crash out on social media. They asked him on an interview, why are you always trying to shoot the fade? He says, well, I don't ever want a Black man to die. Once again, cosplaying Black consciousness, but I feel like we should just shoot the fair one, because that's what you do in prison. Well, you're not in prison anymore, bonehead. You see, so a lot of people know the cosplay. We've been around. Most people, listen, there was a time where we used to talk women out their panties. Am I right or wrong? We know what to say to certain people, that we know how to tell people what they want to hear to get them on our side.
100%.
Same situation here.
Mm-hmm.
Same situation here. But I could give credit to Tookie when the cameras weren't around and he was actually doing live streams with Bloods and Crips, right?
Trying to bring people together.
In prison, doing live streams, telling them, turn away from the gang knife, renounce this lifestyle. This is what I was trying to say earlier. Sorry to interrupt. This is the man who said, I used to be the king of the Crips. Look at my kingdom now. This place will not make you a man.
100%. That's what I was trying to say.
He's doing this when the cameras aren't around. I could take somebody like that serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is what I was trying to speak to before. There was an honor in that life before. I think it was because there was less opportunity or less options, they sort of were forced into the criminality. I'm talking about back in the 70s and 80s. That's at least either the glamorization of what it used to be at that point, or there's some fact to that as well. Whereas now there's so many more options for us as African Americans or Africans in the diaspora.
See, so I think when it comes to the gang stuff, I think that's what we've been told over the years. But the more I look into it, I'm not so sure that necessarily is the reason why.
So real quick, we got 3 minutes. So there's a couple things, right? There is an aspect of individuals being forced into the lifestyle where in Chicago, for example, the gangs would go out recruiting people. They would come to knock on people's doors and say, you better give me one of your kids or we coming in here and we tearing up the joint. This is a reality. For example, if you ever get a chance, you could go on YouTube, you could look at the biography of Isaiah Thomas, played for the Detroit Pistons. Right, he grew up on the west side of Chicago, and that was an actual issue where the gangs would go around recruiting, run up in people's houses, saying, you better give us one of your sons or else. So there were young people who were forced into the lifestyle. Now, historically, these gangs were created because these were criminals who got together to defend their criminal organizations, territories. But moving forward, they started to recruit people. I can even state, growing up in the Midwest, that being the youngest child, I had an older brother who was built like Gazebo, right? And we was in a Crip neighborhood. They tried to jump my brother into the gang, and my brother, being big and strong, it had the body of a grown man as a high school junior, fought them off and beat both of them up. And my brother said to me, I would never join the gang because I know if I join, you would join. But once again, they tried to use coercion to force my brother to join the gang, but my brother was of such massive physical strength for a high schooler, he was over to defeat both of them when they left us alone.
Right.
So that is a reality. right? To where people are being kind of co-opted, forced into these type of gangs for actually their own protection, which is something that happens in prison as well.
That happens. I'm sure that happens in the UK as well in certain areas. I've been protected from that personally because of where I live. But no, that does happen because I know people for whom that has happened to.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely. But family, we got to
thank you
call
so
it.
much.
We got to call it a show. I appreciate everyone for tapping in, and we will be right back at it tomorrow. Appreciate everyone for tapping in. Once again, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, thumbs up,
100%.
thumbs up, thumbs up, and share. Until next time, family, y'all know what to do. Always bet on Black. Peace.
I like that. Bless. Take care.
Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on Black. Peace.